The last week with crews punching holes in walls, in the floor, in the yard, looking for Escobar's hidden spoils.
Beneath Pablo Escobar's lavish estates lay vaults sealed from the world, built to guard more than money. For decades, they were whispered about, lost to rumor and fear.
So I can break some news to you today. They actually did find something.
Now, one has finally been opened. Inside, investigators uncovered weapons, ledgers, and clues to a hidden empire. But what else remains buried in this dark maze of power and paranoia? Join us as we step inside Escobar's secret vault. Escobar's Empire of Wealth. Pablo Escobar's criminal empire began not with wealth or influence, but with petty crime in the streets of Medellin. As a teenager, he discovered that desperation and opportunity could be twisted into profit. He stole tombstones from graveyards, scrubbed off the names with sandblasters, and resold them to unsuspecting buyers. Soon, he graduated to car theft, extortion, and gang violence. The crimes escalated with killing efficiency. By the early 1970s, he was ordering kidnappings for ransom, discarding victims even after payments were made. In 1971, when businessman Diego Echevarria was abducted and executed, Escobar's group walked away with $50,000 and a reputation for ruthlessness that spread quickly through Colombia. This ruthless ambition collided with opportunity when Escobar discovered cocaine. By 1917-6, smuggling routes were forming, and Escobar recognized the trade's future power. That year, he was caught transporting 39 kilograms hidden in a car tire. But the arrest only confirmed his philosophy. Money could erase problems, and violence could erase the people who stood in the way. He bribed his way out of prison, and the officer who had arrested him was soon taken up. From that point forward, Escobar ruled by a simple creed: plata o plomo, meaning silver or lead.
Plata o plomo. Ustedes eligen.
Take the bribe or face the bullet. Bribery bought him more than freedom. It bought him influence. Escobar poured cash into Colombia's political arena, spreading it across both conservative and liberal parties to secure royal allies. In April 1978, he attended a meeting with other traffickers on a rural farm, a gathering that marked the true birth of the Medellin cartel. Within months, their combined operations were shipping nearly 19,000 kilograms of cocaine into the United States. Demand was insatiable, and Escobar had the vision to exploit it on an unprecedented scale. Expansion came swiftly. Alongside partner Carlos later, Escobar turned Norman's Cay in the Bahamas into a fortress of smuggling. The island featured a private airstrip, a dock for incoming shipments, and refrigerated warehouses to hold cocaine until it was ready to flood into the American market. The profits from this operation alone dwarfed anything Escobar had ever imagined. With money flowing in faster than it could be counted, Escobar began reshaping his world. In Antioquia, he built Hacienda Nápoles, a 7,000-acre estate that embodied both extravagance and menace. The property featured a colonial mansion, artificial lakes, a private zoo stocked with giraffes, elephants, and hippos, and even life-size dinosaur statues towering over the grounds. For Escobar, it was more than a home. It was a stage upon which to display his dominance. While his empire grew, Escobar carefully crafted a dual identity. To the poor of Medellin, he was a benefactor. He financed housing projects, schools, hospitals, parks, and football fields. For many, he became known as the Paisa Robin Hood, the outlaw who gave back to the community even as he ruled it through fear. His public image proved powerful enough to carry him into politics. In 1982, he entered Congress as a Liberal Party alternate, securing diplomatic immunity and a passport that allowed him to travel freely. Publicly, he claimed his wealth came from a teenage bicycle rental business. Privately, his billions were already secured by cocaine, but politics exposed him. Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla investigated his past and called him what he truly was, a drug trafficker. Liberal leader Luis Carlos Galan expelled him from the party. By January 1984, Escobar withdrew from politics, and 3 months later, Lara Bonilla was assassinated. The hit silenced a critic, but also cemented Escobar's image as a man willing to take out anyone who opposed him. His battle soon turned against Colombia's judiciary. Judges were bribed, threatened, or executed. Escobar demanded one condition in exchange for surrender: no extradition to the United States. When denied, he financed Los Extraditables, a network devoted to fighting expedition with bombs and bullets. In November 1985, guerrillas stormed the Palace of Justice, taking the lives of more than half the nation's Supreme Court justices. Though Escobar's direct involvement was never proven, suspicion clung to him. Colombia's top court declared the extradition treaty invalid, but the triumph was short-lived. The next president reinstated it with Washington. Escobar retaliated by attacking politics itself. On August 18, 1989, Luis Carlos Galan, the same leader who had expelled him, was assassinated at his orders. Weeks later, Escobar bombed Avianca Flight 203 in an attempt to take out Galan's successor, Cesar Gaviria. Gaviria missed the flight, but all 107 passengers lost their lives, including 2 Americans. The attack marked a decisive moment. The passing of U.S. citizens brought Washington into direct war with Escobar. By the late 1980s, his empire had reached unimaginable heights. The Medellin cartel supplied an estimated 80% of the world. More than 15 tons entered the United States every day, delivered by fleets of planes, ships, and even submarines. Escobar had become the undisputed king of. But with that crown came wealth on a scale the world had rarely seen. At the height of his power, Escobar's cartel earned an estimated $420 million every week. His personal fortune climbed into the range of $30 to $60 billion, equivalent to about $80 billion today. In 1987, Forbes magazine recognized him as one of the richest men alive, listing his fortune at $3 billion and keeping him on the billionaires list for 7 consecutive years. That fortune revealed itself in properties, luxuries, and power plays. Hacienda Nápoles remained his crown jewel, a bizarre mixture of luxury estate and surreal theme park. In Medellin, Escobar constructed the Monaco building, an 8-story fortress for his family, outfitted with swimming pools, tennis courts, secure garages, and a panic room. In Guatapé, he built La Manuela, a lakeside mansion named for his daughter, designed for lavish parties and family retreats. In the Caribbean, he claimed a private corner of Isla Grande, where a mansion with fortified windows, a helicopter pad, and a pool became his hideaway. His wealth extended beyond real estate. Escobar was an obsessive car collector, filling garages with rare and eccentric machines. He owned a Porsche 911 Carrera 3.0 RSR once driven by Formula One champion Emerson Fittipaldi, a Cadillac Vive 8 town sedan styled after Al Capone's, and one of his earliest cartel vehicles, a blue Wartburg 311. His fleet also included rugged Toyota Land Cruisers, nicknamed narcoyotas for their use in cartel operations, alongside rare Porsche 356As, a Harley-Davidson once owned by Frank Sinatra, and even the jet ski featured in the James Bond film The Spy Who Loved Me. Many of these vehicles were later destroyed in car bombings or seized by authorities, their burned shells displayed at Hacienda Nápoles as eerie relics of his extravagance. So vast was Escobar's financial power that he once offered to pay off Colombia's entire $10 billion national debt in exchange for a guarantee against extradition. It was an offer that illustrated both the staggering depth of his fortune and the desperation of a man who knew money alone could no longer shield him from justice. Escobar's billions came in such overwhelming torrents that they became a logistical nightmare. The money arrived too fast to spend, launder, or store in banks. Instead, cash was stuffed into warehouses, hidden behind walls, buried in fields, or locked in underground vaults. His brother Roberto, the cartel's accountant, later admitted that nearly 10% of all stored cash, more than $2 billion each year, was lost to rats, mold, and water damage. The waste barely made a dent in the fortune's size. The solutions bordered on absurd. The cartel spent around $2,500 every month on rubber bands alone, simply to keep the stacks of dollars together. On one occasion, while in hiding, Escobar burned $2 million in banknotes just to keep his daughter warm through a cold night. Money had become so abundant that it was treated as fuel, kindling, or garbage. Cartel safe houses doubled as vaults. Behind concrete walls, fortunes were stacked floor to ceiling. Farms across Antioquia concealed sealed barrels of bills, many of which remain buried and undiscovered decades later. Some caches shared space with weapons, ledgers, and evidence of the cartel's reach. Rumors spread of tunnels beneath properties, torture chambers disguised as storerooms, and escape passages guarded by hidden doors. Whether every rumor was true hardly mattered. The mystique of Escobar's hidden wealth grew larger than the man himself. Escobar's paranoia fed his need for concealment. He trusted no bank, no accountant, and only a handful of family members. Money was buried, not balanced. Records were kept in secret ledgers, not in ledgers that could be traced. Each vault was both a guarantee of survival and a symbol of fear, proof that wealth meant little if it could not be protected from rivals, the state, or betrayal. Despite all his power, Escobar could not escape the collapse of his empire. When Pablo Escobar was gunned down, Colombia erupted with relief. But even as authorities celebrated his death, another mystery began to unfold. What had happened to the billions of dollars Escobar had hidden away? The discovery of secret vaults. Pablo Escobar's empire began to reveal its hidden layers long before his final downfall. In the early 1980s, whispers spread of secret caches scattered across Colombia and beyond. Escobar himself deepened the intrigue when he purchased a pastel-pink mansion on North Bay Road in Miami Beach. The 4-bedroom waterfront property, with direct access to Biscayne Bay, became notorious among locals who suspected it was used as both a cartel hideout and a storage site. By the mid-1980s, U.S. authorities seized the mansion, convinced it concealed safes inside its walls and foundation. The government intensified its search as Escobar's power began to slip in the early 1990s. Police and soldiers raided his estates and warehouses, tearing apart walls and digging through courtyards. At Hacienda Nápoles, his grand estate, they uncovered underground vaults. Yet despite the scale of these raids, only fragments of the hidden fortune surfaced. After Escobar was gunned down, his widow and children fled to Argentina, claiming they had been left with nothing. His son, now known as Sebastian Marroquin, later wrote about his father's empire, but insisted the family never saw any of the billions once under Escobar's control. In 2016, Escobar's Miami mansion resurfaced in headlines. When new owners Christian de Berduare and Jennifer Valapi demolished it, workers discovered heavy concrete safes embedded in the foundation. One safe disappeared before it could be examined, sparking rumors of theft. Another was moved under armed guard to a Florida bank. Later, a sealed metal cylinder was found beneath the kitchen stove, but it turned out to be empty. The search drew international attention in 2017, when the Discovery Channel launched Finding Escobar's Millions. Former CIA operatives Doug Lowe and Ben Smith combed through Colombia with drones, ground-penetrating radar, and metal detectors. They investigated cartel estates and farmland, even uncovering a safe that ultimately held nothing. The series revealed the sophistication of Escobar's methods: safes lined with lead, vaults disguised within walls, and bunkers reinforced with concrete. The operatives also explored the human side of the story. Undercover as filmmakers, they interviewed surviving cartel members and relatives. Escobar's sister, Luz Maria, described her efforts to atone by leaving letters at victims' graves. They also spoke with John Jairo Velasquez, alias Popeye, who admitted to ordering more than 3,000 hits, and Juan Esteban, known as the Scorpion, who claimed staggering amounts of money were still hidden across Medellin. Their search was not without danger. Doug Lowe compared it to kicking a hornet's nest, noting that even years later, violence surrounded Escobar's legacy. The legend was reignited in 2020, when Escobar's nephew Nicolas claimed to have discovered $18 million inside one of his uncle's old Medellin houses. He said a vision guided him to the spot, where he uncovered bundles of bills wrapped in plastic, along with a gold pen, a typewriter, and a satellite phone. Most of the money had decayed beyond use, destroyed by damp conditions. Nicolas admitted he had found other caches in the past, but refused to share details. Over the decades, Colombian newspapers have published photographs of real discoveries: $4 million in barrels in 1989, $25 million with gold bars in 1990, $10 million at Hacienda Nápoles in 2009, and countless smaller finds. Officially, the government has recovered about $75 million, but investigators believe at least 10 times that amount may still lie hidden, rotting in the ground or waiting to be uncovered. Some finds have sparked debate over ownership. In certain cases, cash had rotted into useless scraps. In others, pristine bundles were pulled from rusty barrels, still crisp decades later. One farmer in Antioquia unearthed drums of dollars so well preserved they looked freshly buried, igniting arguments over whether he should be rewarded or stripped of the find entirely. The world remembers Pablo Escobar for the billions he controlled, but after his death, discoveries buried in walls, fields, and foundations revealed shocking secrets far beyond the numbers. What exactly was uncovered? The darker secrets. While still at the height of his power, Pablo Escobar had already built an invisible empire beneath the ground. His secret vaults were not mere hiding places. They were engineered to safeguard money, weapons, secrets, and, in moments of crisis, even his own life. From the outside, Hacienda Nápoles appeared to be a playground of excess, filled with exotic animals, swimming pools, and sprawling courtyards. Yet beneath this display of luxury lay hidden chambers reinforced with steel doors and concrete walls. These underground rooms revealed the truth. The estate was as much a fortress as it was a symbol of wealth. Raids on his properties in the early 1990s stunned investigators. Inside the vaults, they found crates of AK-47 rifles, grenades, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. In some locations, rocket launchers and body armor were stored beside stacks of US dollars. Each vault was essentially a war chest designed to secure Escobar's fortune while ensuring he was armed for siege at a moment's notice. But money and weapons were only part of the story. Hidden in waterproof containers, investigators uncovered ledgers and documents far more dangerous than firearms. They detailed shipment schedules, coded financial transactions, and extensive lists of bribes to politicians, police, and judges. In precise handwriting, these records mapped the reach of the Medellin cartel, stretching from Colombia to Miami and beyond into Europe. For prosecutors, these ledgers were invaluable, offering a rare blueprint of how Escobar's empire operated. Frighteningly, the vaults were not the only thing Escobar took his time to craft. Former associates and locals described soundproof, windowless rooms fitted with hooks and drainage systems, hinting at torture or interrogation chambers. Though investigators never formally documented such sites, the accounts matched Escobar's reputation for ruthless intimidation. In 1991, facing mounting pressure from the Colombian government and the United States, Escobar struck a deal to surrender. He would serve up to 5 years in prison, but he would not be extradited to the U.S. Instead of entering a state-run facility, he constructed his own penitentiary high on a mountain overlooking Medellin, the cathedral. To serve his sentence, Escobar chose his own guards, men loyal only to him, and filled the compound with luxuries. It included a football pitch, a bar, a jacuzzi, a waterfall, and even a giant dollhouse. A telescope on the balcony allowed him to watch over Medellin and glimpse his family home while speaking with them by phone. It quickly earned nicknames such as Hotel Escobar and Club Medellin. Behind the facade, however, the design served a deeper purpose: survival. Escape routes were embedded into its structure, with rumors of trap doors, tunnels, and ventilated passageways. Its mountaintop location, often cloaked in evening fog and protected by cliffs, made military assaults nearly impossible. Escobar even stocked an armory inside the prison, ensuring he could defend himself if needed. For a time, the arrangement held. Escobar continued to manage his cartel operations from within, and the government tolerated it. But in 1992, reports emerged that he had ordered the torture and execution of 4 of his own men inside La Catedral. The scandal forced authorities to act, demanding his transfer to a regular prison. Escobar refused. In July, troops surrounded La Catedral, but when they entered, he was gone. Escobar had escaped through a wall built with intentionally weak concrete, breaking through and vanishing into the mist. His foresight in constructing escape routes once again revealed how vital hidden passages and vault-like systems were to his survival. After his escape, La Catedral was abandoned, and its legend was cemented. Years later, in 2007, Benedictine monks transformed the site into a monastery, adding a chapel, a library, and a memorial for Escobar's victims. Pilgrims still visit, walking the same grounds where Escobar lived as both prisoner and king. Even after his death, stories of tunnels persisted. An FBI informant claimed Escobar built subterranean catacombs equipped with air circulation, enabling him to hide underground for days. Colombian raids on Medellin safe houses uncovered partial shafts and freshly dug passageways, reinforcing the claims. These discoveries suggested his obsession with concealment went beyond storing money. He designed escape systems meant to keep him always one step ahead. However, this very mindset would lead him straight into his enemy's trap. The beginning of the end. American involvement in the pursuit of Pablo Escobar began in 1989, when President George H.W. Bush authorized a covert mission known as Operation Heavy Shadow. Its purpose was to help Colombia dismantle the Medellin cartel. That August, the United States deployed Centra Spike, an elite Army signals unit skilled at tracing fugitives through intercepted radio and phone transmissions. Their surveillance forced Escobar into hiding and supplied the intelligence that led to the passing of his powerful ally, José Rodríguez Gacha. Yet despite years of monitoring, Escobar always slipped away, protected by loyalists inside Colombia's police and military. By mid-1991, Escobar secured a controversial deal with the Colombian government. He was allowed to retreat into La Catedral. However, when that arrangement collapsed on July 22, 1992, Escobar immediately became a prey. In Maryland, U.S. Ambassador Morris D. Busby was woken by 2 phone calls. The first brought long-awaited news. President Cesar Gaviria had finally ordered Escobar's transfer from La Catedral, something Busby had urged for more than a year. The second was devastating. Escobar had already walked out and vanished into Medellin with 9 of his men. At the presidential palace in Bogotá, Gaviria raged as reports confirmed the disaster. No assault had been carried out as he ordered. Instead, the Vice Minister of Justice and the prison's chief had entered La Catedral without authorization, only to be taken hostage. The nation's credibility collapsed in one night. Along with years of U.S. pressure, hundreds of lives, and millions in covert funding. For months, Gaviria had resisted deeper American involvement, but humiliation changed his stance. He turned to Busby and demanded full U.S. support, vowing Escobar would never again see a courtroom or prison cell. For Busby, a former Navy officer and counterterrorism veteran, this was the opening he had been waiting for. Busby knew time was critical. If given space, Escobar would rebuild his Medellin empire. He needed to be hunted immediately, while still exposed. Busby called on Major Steve Jacoby, the man who had quietly operated in Bogotá since 1989 with Centra Spike. Jacoby and his team had listened to Escobar's calls for years, memorizing his calm, measured tone, polished Spanish laced with English, as he ordered kidnappings, reorganized operations, and spoke tenderly to his wife in the same breath. Jacoby believed he could locate Escobar within days. The real challenge was whether the Colombians could strike fast enough. Their raids were slow, corrupt, and often leaked directly to Escobar. Busby concluded that only one unit could close the gap: Delta Force, America's most secretive counterterrorism team. Inside the embassy's steel vault, Busby, Jacoby, DEA Chief Joe Toft, and CIA station head Bill Wagner debated their options. Colombian law forbade foreign troops, but Busby argued Delta could operate undetected, disguised as trainers and advisors. All agreed Escobar would never be taken alive. Prisons and trials had already failed. This time, the hunt would end with death. Washington responded quickly. President Bush, heavily invested in the war on cocaine, personally backed the plan. After consulting General Colin Powell, he instructed Defense Secretary Dick Cheney to give Busby whatever he needed. On July 26th, a Delta Force team under Colonel Jerry Boykin arrived in Bogotá under civilian cover. 2 days after Escobar's escape, he re-emerged with a statement to Colombian media, signed Colombian Jungle Zone, Thursday, July 24, 1992. It portrayed him as a betrayed man forced to flee. He claimed government treachery had left him no choice but to escape, and even proposed a new deal, returning to prison if the United Nations guaranteed his safety. At the same time, his phone calls to lawyers were intercepted by Centra Spike. Escobar accused the United States of interfering in Colombia's affairs, instructing his attorneys to press President Gaviria on alleged American involvement. It was a calculated attempt to stir resentment against both the government and Washington. But Gaviria stood firm. La Catedral was gone for good, and Escobar was once again a fugitive. Centra Spike tracked his location to a wealthy Medellin suburb only miles from La Catedral. For the first time, the Americans had both the tools and the political authority to act. By late July 1992, with Escobar already reorganizing, the man chosen to lead the hunt was Colonel Hugo Martinez. Hardened by years of failure and personal danger, Martinez had survived assassination attempts, bombs under his family's home, and even a $6 billion bribe offered by a friend on Escobar's behalf. His refusal to bend defined him. Returning from Madrid, Martinez rebuilt the Bloc de Búsqueda into a force of 600 men, soldiers and police drilled into a disciplined strike unit with one mission: destroy Escobar. Unlike his arrogant predecessor, Pinzon, Martinez demanded results. His methods were harsh, even brutal, but they worked. The Americans supplied intelligence and technology. Martinez enforced discipline and fear. For the first time, Escobar faced an enemy who could not be bribed, intimidated, or bargained with. As predicted, Escobar's response soon turned violent, and he started attacking civilians. Despite billions spent and advanced tracking tools, Escobar remained elusive. Centra Spike pinpointed his calls with precision. Delta and Search Block raided hideouts with growing speed. Escobar adapted, escaped, and struck back with bombs and executions. When the Search Block took out Brant's Hyson Munoz, one of Escobar's most feared hitmen, Escobar retaliated immediately, and 3 police officers lost their lives that same day. Funerals became routine, with widows fainting and officers buried weekly, victims of Escobar's informants, and outside Medellin, his support collapsed. The turning point was the bookstore massacre. Outrage forced the government to declare Escobar public enemy number 1, placing a bounty of 5 billion pesos, about $6.5 million, for his capture. It was the largest reward ever offered in Colombia. Soon, a new force emerged: Los Pepes, short for People Persecuted by Pablo Escobar. They bombed Escobar's estates, threatened his family, and left his associates lifeless with signs pinned to their bodies. Unlike the state, Los Pepes offered no trials, no deals, no mercy. Their campaign made clear: anyone tied to Escobar would pay in blood. For Martinez, who had hunted Escobar for nearly 4 years, and for the Americans, who had pursued him for 6 months, Los Pepes became an unspoken ally. Their campaign of car bombs, assassinations, and threats devastated Escobar's network. Publicly, the Americans condemned the violence. Privately, they recognized its effectiveness. For years, Escobar had hidden behind lawyers, surrender deals, and political leverage. Now, his greatest weapon, terror, was being turned against him. The final irony. By early 1993, the manhunt for Pablo Escobar had taken a brutal turn. At Search Block headquarters in Medellin, Colonel Hugo Martinez kept a drawer filled with photographs of the dead. Showing the stack to a Delta Force operator, he said plainly, "As long as I'm the commander here, they're not going to live." Martinez's unit claimed more than a dozen lives, often recording them as casualties in gun battles. Yet, the photographs told a different story. Bullet wounds to the head, signs of execution rather than combat. Despite the raids, Escobar repeatedly slipped away in the final moments. Delta operators called it bitterly, the last 100 yards. Still, Martinez earned respect. Prisoners who resisted interrogation rarely survived, but those who cooperated were jailed instead. His refusal to bend, coupled with American technology, made the search block a relentless weapon. The Americans and Colombians knew they were racing against their own government. Attorney General Gustavo de Greiff continued to push for surrender negotiations, a prospect U.S. officials feared would repeat the fiasco of La Catedral. A DEA memo in September 1993 warned that Escobar might strike a new farce deal. Some of his men did give up. On October 8th, his brother Roberto Escobar and feared hitman John Popeye Velasquez surrendered and were sent to Itagüí prison in Medellin. Escobar showed no such inclination. Instead, his lawyers kept negotiating, to the fury of those risking their lives to bring him down. Frustration boiled over. Colonel Gustavo Bermudez even told Colombian television he would rather see Escobar dead than captured. The remark sparked outrage and a direct death threat from Escobar's teenage son. Bermudez retracted his words, but he had spoken what many thought in silence. At the same time, Escobar's enemies multiplied. His execution of longtime partners Fernando Galeano and William Moncada in 1992 gave birth to a deadly vendetta. Their widows, Mireya Galeano and Dolly Moncada, had both resources and knowledge of his network. Along with Diego Murillo, known as Don Berna, they became the nucleus of Los Pepes. The group recruited sicarios with offers of 20 million pesos each. By October 1992, Moncada and Galeano relatives were cooperating with investigators, supplying intelligence that guided raids and assassinations. Escobar recognized the danger, particularly in Dolly Moncada. After taking out her husband, he ransacked her home and kidnapped anyone who might know her whereabouts. He even offered a $3 million reward for her capture. By then, she was already beyond his reach. In August 1992, U.S. agents had flown her to Washington, D.C., where she became a DEA informant under the code name AZE 92053. Her anger at Escobar fueled her cooperation. She handed over exhaustive intelligence on his finances, properties, and inner circle, listing lawyers she described as worse than Escobar. She urged authorities to strip him of assets and target his family and associates, believing it would destabilize him. Her vendetta deepened after her younger brother, an MIT student with no cartel ties, was kidnapped and murdered. From that point, Dolly openly pushed for retaliation, shaping the increasingly ruthless tone of the campaign against Escobar. Other former allies also turned. Carlos Lader, once Escobar's flamboyant partner, sat in a U.S. prison seeking leniency. In a detailed letter to the DEA, he described Escobar's movements between safe houses near Medellin, his reliance on cell networks, his guards, his escape routes, and even his physical weakness. Obese, unfit, and unable to run more than a few minutes. Fidel Castaño, a paramilitary leader and former associate, also broke ranks after Escobar murdered his friends. He began feeding information to Colombian and U.S. forces. In one raid, DEA agent Javier Peña noted, Castaño even joined search block operators in the field trying to save a drowning officer. His betrayal added yet another layer of pressure. By late 1993, the walls were closing in. Centra Spike, the U.S. Army's covert signals unit, had perfected the art of tracking Escobar's phone calls. Despite knowing the risk, he could not resist calling his family, who who were scattered across countries and under constant harassment. On December 2nd, the day after his 44th birthday, Escobar phoned his son Juan Pablo for an unusually long time. It was the slip Centra Spike had been waiting for. Within hours, Colonel Martinez's men were converging on Medellin's Los Olivos neighborhood. Inside a modest row house, Escobar and his loyal chauffeur, Alvaro de Jesus Agudelo, El Limon, waited in plain sight, convinced no one would think to look so close to home. But a policeman spotted a long-haired, bearded man in an upstairs window. He looked older and heavier than Escobar's photographs, but the hunters knew. The assault was swift. El Limon bolted first, crashing through a window onto the lower roof and sprinting away. A burst of gunfire cut him down. Escobar followed, armed with 2 pistols, including the Sig Sauer he had once surrendered at La Catedral. He scrambled across the rooftops, returning fire, but 3 bullets struck him, 1 in the leg, 1 in the back, and 1 through the ear. Minutes later, the world's most notorious trafficker lay lifeless beside his bodyguard. The question of who fired the fatal shot sparked immediate dispute. Search Block officer Hugo Aguilar claimed credit. Don Berna insisted it was his brother. Conspiracy theorists said U.S. agents had pulled the trigger. No conclusive witness emerged. Neighbors had hidden indoors, and the first photographs, taken by DEA agent Steve Murphy, came only after Escobar was lifeless. The scene quickly dissolved into chaos as police, journalists, and onlookers swarmed the house, erasing potential evidence. The official autopsy named a gunshot to the head as the cause of his passing, but raised new questions. When his body was exhumed in 2006 for a paternity test, no new answers appeared. In 2020, forensic tests recreated the wounds with ballistic gel, supporting a theory long advanced by journalist Mark Bowden. The headshot was delivered by a 9mm handgun, likely at close range, not by a rifle. The wound showed no clear gunpowder tattooing, suggesting the barrel may have been pressed directly to his head or that residue simply failed to register. Some investigators saw this as proof of self-harm, recalling Escobar's vow never to be taken alive. Others suspected a coup de grace delivered by one of his hunters. The official coroner's report, oddly accompanied by a press release, went out of its way to deny self-harm, fueling suspicion rather than resolving it. Despite the uncertainty, one fact remained. Escobar's reign ended that day. His body, lowered from the rooftop, was photographed with grim satisfaction by the search block. For many Colombians, it was freedom after years of terror, while for others, it just meant that one brand of violence had merely been replaced by another, as Los Pepes continued their campaign with tacit state tolerance. To the world, the image of Escobar's corpse in Medellin showed the body of a man who had been hunted, betrayed, and cornered in the very city that had once worshipped him. Thanks for watching. See you in our next video.